as Jessica said, we are here in a neighborhood that so many immigrants call home. And we are here speaking about not only our vision for this city as it should be, but also the reality of the city as it is today. Yesterday, a video was brought to light that Brad shared with our colleague, State Senator Gustavo Rivera, showcasing the very acts that shocked the conscience, not just of New Yorkers, but of Americans from coast to coast across this entire country. The wife of a detained man begging an ICE agent to free her husband. When he ignored her, she pleaded to be taken too. And behind her stood 2 young children. And after taunting her with a response of adios, adios, suddenly that agent threw her to the ground. The kids began to cry, traumatized by the sight of their mother being assaulted in a government building. And when she was released, she said, in Ecuador, they beat us there too. I didn't think I'd come here to the United States and the same thing would happen to me. And we welcome the news that that officer has been relieved of their duties. And yet what shocked us was not simply that act, but was the fact that we knew that that act is taking place every day across this country. Oftentimes unseen, unnoticed, and unabashed in its cruelty. And it's important that we describe it, that we stand up to it, because if we do not, it becomes normalized. It was only because of the response to this act that that officer has been relieved. And it is only from the responses from those who have been standing on the front lines of this fight, and so many Americans across the country, that we will finally hold this administration accountable for the ways in which they have torn apart the very fabric of this country. And we know that where New York City should reject these horrors, we have instead had a city hall and an administration that has embraced them. One that has accepted a deal that would wrap the personal freedom of this mayor intertwined with the assistance of an immigration agenda of this federal administration. And we know what happened yesterday is just par for the course, where a mayor is willing to broker a deal with a president no matter the cost it comes to the people that he's elected to serve. Willing to enmesh ICE in our jails, on our streets, and day-to-day. Who showcase the model for how we can stand up for this city. Who go to 26 Federal Plaza again and again to try and shed some light on the ways in which not only is this administration breaking the law, judgments from court orders, but also doing so in a brazen fashion that is as if gleeful in the cruelty they impart upon New Yorkers. And I will be a mayor who will finally turn the page on this chapter of our city. A mayor who not only defends but is proud of our sanctuary city laws. One that recognizes that they are laws that keep us safe. One that looks at this city and the 40% of its residents who were born outside of this country as just as New York as anyone else. And one that commits to hiring the 200 lawyers such that our law department can finally return to pre-pandemic levels. One that ensures we increase legal representation of immigrant New Yorkers who are under attack. And one that learns from the manner in which we took on the first Trump administration, where we had a city hall that was willing to protect immigrant New Yorkers' personal information lest it be used for the purposes of facilitating a deportation machine. And while I will do these things, I will do so in stark contrast to a former governor, Andrew Cuomo, who, as Assemblymember Simone has said, has not only been quiet amidst this kind of repression, whether it be the attack on this mother or the detaining of a 6-year-old girl right in the neighborhood where Assemblywoman Gonzalez Rojas represents, but also a man who told New Yorkers shocked at the actions of this administration in California and said, let's not overreact. A man who got on the debate stage alongside Controller Lander and myself and called undocumented New Yorkers illegals. And a man for whom Federal Plaza is a place that he dare not name, because lest it complicate his effort to work with this president to subvert the will of Democratic primary voters. And so I stand here thinking not just of that woman, not just of her 2 children, not just of her husband, but also of the countless whose names we do not know, whose faces we have never seen. and who are one part of the story of a shadow that has descended upon our nation, of the ripping up of the very words that Comptroller Lander began this press conference with, and a betrayal of the values that make so many of us so proud to belong to this city. And we stand here in recognition of that betrayal and in a shared commitment and purpose to once again live up to those ideals, because those ideals will endure far longer than the ones who are in power betraying them today. Thank you so much.
We'll start with on-topic questions, and the Comptroller and Assembly members will do questions as well. On-topipic questions.
If you guys
Yeah,
want to jump
Kelly.
in, you can feel free as well.
Yeah, you mentioned that the ICE officer that was engaging with students welcomed that, but you know, being there myself, that's just one instance. Do you think that the ICE officers in general should be held accountable? And also, California, I think, just passed something where they have to unmask themselves. Would that be something that you would resort to if you were elected?
Do you want to start with this?
Thank you, Zohran. I have a bill with the great State Senator Pat Fay, the same exact bill, modeled after the California bill. It's not just for ICE, it's for all law enforcement. You know, we talked about the drama about mass protesters, but yet we have unidentified secret police in the United States of America. There's even been cases across the country where people imitated them and robbed a home. It's un-American for masked police to be enforcing any law, and we know they're not all following the law. You've seen what happened yesterday, as Zohran has said. So many cases are not being videotaped. It's un-American. And I call upon my leader in the Assembly and in the Senate that we pass the MELT Act, which will eliminate the use of masks in law enforcement and force people to have identifiable badge and number. You have to be held accountable for what you're doing in this nation. I know from on up high and the White House down, many have not been held accountable, but eventually they will.
And I think the very premise of your question is one that we have to underline. This is but the tip of the iceberg of what we are seeing in terms of ICE's actions across the country. And I have appreciated in so many who have stood up against this an emphasis on the fact that the law is something that has to be followed, no matter whether we are even speaking of law enforcement agents such as ICE agents themselves. Governor Pritzker made that clear when Donald Trump sought to deploy the National Guard to Illinois, that those same members would be held to the same laws as everyone else in that state. And that is the message that we have. Though Donald Trump may treat the law as if it is a suggestion, we know what it actually is, and that is something to be followed.
Just really quick, yesterday the DOI put out a report that officer with the Department of Corrections on 2 instances of the civil immigration enforcement here in the city, which he shouldn't do, but he blamed it on not being trained enough. Your reaction to that, and then will you have some sort of trainings if you were to be elected mayor?
In the DOI's own findings, they too stated that this was the result of a lack of training by the Adams administration. And it showcases a result of an administration that has sought to collaborate with the federal government, and one whose collaboration is being spelled out in the open. When the indictment was being dropped for Eric Adams, it was being stated for all of us to see that it was done with an intent to facilitate the immigration objectives of this federal government. And so it is no surprise that New Yorkers who are working for that same administration are not being trained in the manner that they should to follow the law and to ensure that civil immigration is not something that is being carried out in assistance with ICE agents.
Yeah, Gloria. 2 questions. For the Comptroller, I know you were there yesterday. I know not in the immediate floor where the incident happened, but what can you share more about Ms. Galarza? I understand your office has been in communication. Tell us a little bit about her. Are her children U.S. citizens? What have you been able to learn about their story? And for you, Zohran, I hear you on hiring lawyers so that people can have representation. I guess I'm wondering if there's anything you feel you might be able to do more in the immediate win in November to stop what's happening at 26 Federal, considering that is federal jurisdiction and the city has limited power when it comes to what goes on in that.
I mean, I think these questions are really linked because, look, what the video from yesterday shocked people's consciences. I had in my mention several people who were like, who admitted they're Trump supporters, that they don't even disagree on immigration policy, but they were still horrified by what took place yesterday, except that it is happening every day. And many of you have been down there, and, you know, I want to praise the press corps who have been there showing. Last week, an individual, I think was a U.S. citizen, was choked by an ICE agent. There are brutal family separations, almost every day, certainly weekly. And, I mean, you could see it in that agent yesterday. I mean, he's drunk on violence.
Yeah.
He was, when we say the cruelty is the point, sometimes you say if this is what they do when the cameras are on, what do they do when they're off? But they're trying to demonstrate cruelty, to make people afraid of speaking up, of asking questions, of bearing witness. And that's why we feel like it's so important to be there bearing witness. And I was really moved when she, yesterday, after she was released, and I'll give credit to the ProPublica reporter who gave her the platform, to say, this is what we were fleeing. Like in Ecuador, they beat us, but we thought the United States was better or different from that. And we're insisting that it be better and different from that. So I don't know too much more about her status. They've come more recently. I believe the kids were born in Ecuador, so they're not citizens, but they're human beings. They don't deserve to see their father ripped from their mother's arms and their mom thrown to the ground by our tax dollars. And let's just remember, because I really don't want to make it seem like there's a line between that and the detention itself. The detentions that are taking place in 26 Federal Plaza are utterly lawless. These are all people who have come to court to appear before an immigration judge. They respond to the paper they have. The judge says, here's your court date, here's your next time to show up. And then these masked agents who don't identify themselves, who don't present warrants, who don't give any grounds for the abductions because they have no grounds for the abductions, act like thugs in the hallway. It is cruel and lawless. We're absolutely going to keep crying out for it. And one thing we've asked Eric Adams to do, and I'll be enthusiastic when Mayor Mamdani does it, is everybody who's got a lawyer at this point, more or less, has had their lawyer ask that they could have a virtual hearing. And they get to appear before the judge, but they don't have to go down to 26 Federal Plaza and risk being abducted or abused. But the city has not yet significantly scaled up the effort to make sure that everyone possible has representation so they don't have to face what that family faced yesterday.
I think, as the controller said, that representation is key. And in addition, one of the key responsibilities of leadership is telling New Yorkers what you deem to be acceptable in the conduct as it pertains to the federal government and politics across this country. And amidst this horror, we have seen the current mayor abdicate that responsibility entirely. This is a position that has been described as having the second largest bully pulpit in the country. It is a platform with which you can extend dignity to each and every New Yorker, where you can say that when you look at that video, you know that you represent that woman as well as everyone who is here in this park. And yet what we have seen is silence at best from this mayor, and similarly from a former governor seeking to become the next mayor. And so what I will do is not just increase the lawyers we have to pre-pandemic levels to ensure that a storied law department finally has the backing so that it can continue on its record of protecting working class New Yorkers, but also to increase legal representation, as has been said, for immigrant New Yorkers facing these kinds of threats. And finally, to ensure that we're using every tool, whether technical or also political, to stand up for the dignity of these same immigrant New Yorkers.
And can I just add something? As a state representative that's been fighting alongside Zohran or alongside Tony and others, it is critical that he has the partnership of those of us in Albany, and the fact that he got the endorsements of the three most important people in the room, no longer three men in the room, thankfully, but the two women and one man, made that support clear to work with Zohran as our next mayor. And we're going to have to pass policies at the state level that will certainly impact New Yorkers here in the city. And that includes the Access to Representation Act, which would fund that legal system and make sure everyone has access to a lawyer, and New York for All, that would prevent collusion at every level of government to ensure that we're not cooperating with ICE and we end these 287G programs.
We've got time for two more questions. We'll go Melissa.
Is this on topic still? I don't know.
Off topic side.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
But just one question, please.
Okay. So many New Yorkers agree with you, and we heard you condemning the law in Gaza. You talked about this as a campaign when everybody was weighing in this mayor's race on the Prime Minister Netanyahu's remarks this morning. Some New Yorkers say that they don't hear you as often condemn Hamas or talk about bringing the hostages. So
I am not going to echo the words of Benjamin Netanyahu. I can, however, share my own words and say them right here, which is that my politics is built on a universality, and I can think of no better illustration of that than from the words of the hostage families themselves. Everyone for everyone. It is something that they have said for months. It is something that they have called for in not only understanding that those hostages must be released, but that this is intertwined with the end of this genocide. And there are so many of us who have called for ceasefires precisely because the greatest moment of relief, whether it be in the release of hostages or the ending of the Israeli military's killing of Palestinians, is in those very moments of the cessation of hostilities, of that ceasefire. And so when we call for this, it is a call for hostages and Palestinians alike and understanding their dignity. And what has been so infuriating to me and to so many New Yorkers, frankly, Netanyahu's use of the hostages as a justification to continue a war that has only continued to endanger the lives of those very hostages as well as of so many Palestinians. And to have a mayor who went to the United Nations to watch his address and then thank Benjamin Netanyahu for defending the Western world and our way of life. Those are the words that Eric Adams shared. I can't even begin to explain the offense that that brings to New Yorkers across the 5 boroughs. How can we describe the killing of a child once an hour, every hour for close to 2 years as a defense of our way of life? That is not a way of life that any of us practice in this city. What we want in this city is dignity for all. And the hostage families have given us an understanding of how to showcase that. And I have appreciated the moments, especially also ones that I have shared with Controller Lander, where we have mourned the deaths of Israelis and Palestinians alike and understood that there is no competition for humanity. There is only a struggle to ensure that it is extended to all people.
Okay, last question. Go, Henry.
Hi, how you doing, Zoe?
Hey, Henry.
So actually back to immigration, if I could,
Yes.
please. You mentioned following the Illinois governor's model as far as stopping ICE if you are elected mayor. Can you go into more detail there? Are you saying you would give your police commissioner and police department the directive to arrest ICE agents, and would you post them at immigration court?
What I'm saying is underlining the fact that no one is above the law. And I would work with my police commissioner to ensure that we're delivering actual public safety. And I've appreciated the current commissioner, Jessica Tisch, has made it clear that in the pursuit of public safety, we do not need the National Guard's deployment here in New York City. It does not serve to the advancement of that agenda. And I look at not only the example of Illinois, but also California, where the mayor of LA worked with the attorney general of the state as well as the governor to file a lawsuit against the deployment of the National Guard in that state. A judge recently found in their favor that that deployment was illegal. The attorney general of that state found that for every dollar they spent on legal fees, they recovered more than $32,000 in otherwise lost funding from the federal government. And I am thankful and proud, as Assemblywoman Gonzalez Rojas said, that I stand here with the endorsement of our equivalents of those leaders. The Attorney General Tish James, the Governor Kathy Hochul, and I look forward to working with them in fighting back against this federal administration. And I know that they have faced threats for their willingness to stand up for New Yorkers. I think of our Attorney General each and every day and the ways in which this federal government is seeking to make an example of her for having the audacity to hold them to account. We stand with her, and we stand with each and every New Yorker and the law that protects them to ensure that we actually deliver on the vision we have for the city.
Should the ICE agent be charged with a crime?
I think if the ICE agent has violated a law and is found to have done so, then yes, they should be charged. Everyone should be held to the same laws. We cannot have a separate system for those, especially that are seeking to enforce those laws. Thank you.
Thank you